Back in early 2020, the Tested team and I flew to New Zealand to visit our friends at Wētā Workshop as they embarked on their most ambitious project yet. A sprawling exhibition celebrating the creative genius and the deep problem solving that Wētā Workshop and Richard Taylor have made world famous. That exhibition, now called Wētā Workshop Unleashed, is open for public display in Auckland, New Zealand, and I cannot wait to see it in person. But until then, let's go back and visit me and the Tested team in early 2020. One of the things that I'm most thrilled about to eventually walk through it is how they plan to play with scale, to play with our perceptions of scale. And one of the key ways they're going to do this is by using something that I think this is the best shop in the world at right now, and that is way oversized human figures. In this case, an 8x version of my friend Johnny Fraser-Allen. Let's go see Johnny get a super big head. Look, of course I want to make a pun, so this really puts a face on the exhibition, doesn't it?
Yes, this is our 8x life-size Johnny that we're working on at the moment.
8x, and it's your face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, it doesn't look like me yet because it's gonna have a beard and eyebrows. Yeah. Once the face is 50% hair, it'll look more like me.
Walk me through the process of just obtaining the shape here. Did you get scanned?
Yeah, lots. Well, you can see here, you've got to leave your dignity at the door and shave yourself and get in a tight spandex, and Richard art directed me on a chair the exact way. Richard had blocked this sculpture out to begin with.
Okay, so this is a person here is about this tall, and this is right. Okay, so this is the face. I got it.
Yeah, and you know, Richard, how fast he works. So fast, in fact, it's one of those things where I was told I needed to be ready for a scan that afternoon. Sorry, scan? You know, so I guess I'm in the exhibition as this, you know, giant head, which is fun. And I don't think I'd shaved for about 10 years, so that was incredibly painful. I don't know how people do that every day. And you can see I'm already breaking out in a rash there. But and Richard's idea, which is really fun, is you've just experienced the artist's shed of how we've conceptually conceived this world. Mm-hmm. And you walk past a one-to-one scale of me asleep at my desk sculpting something, and then you walk around the corner and suddenly you are the sculpture and you're on the artist's work desk, and you look up and you see the big version of me. So you get to feel like a borrower or, you know, Ant-Man or whatever it is, you know, like your small version.
Change the scale like that.
Yeah. So by this stage, you've gone through several scales to get here. So it's a real, like, through the looking glass experience.
It's a thrill for the viewer. I'm curious personally what it's like for you to see an 8x version of your head.
I don't know what to say. Like, I avoid the mirror on a usual day, you know, so to see yourself this big, you know, and then there's going to be all this blown up reference of me. So I made sure I had hay fever and a pimple when they took that photo, you know, just to get that extra realism in, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's going to make a lot of work for the hair punching team once they get those big, huge Jane Wenley eyebrows punched in. And you know the process, right? We have to shave a yak and dye the hair black in order to get the level of thickness for each individual hair that gets individually punched into the silicon face.
Richard, I see you're working in plasticine, but this whole face isn't a single chunk of monolithic plasticine, is it?
No, it's not. We've milled it in polystyrene first, of course, putting on the plasticine. As
you have a mill big enough for this?
Yes, yeah. We've got a robot that can mill out fairly significant scale things. It's a retired car assembly robot.
So it's had a second life.
Yeah, Jordan has gone and repurposed it into a milling machine, one of the 8 milling machines that he's built over the years. Amazing. And with Johnny's scan, we mill it to a certain level. We could arguably go to a much higher level of fidelity, but it's not worth it because the sculptors, Jane and Gong and Dan and C and others, would much prefer to use human hand skills to actually put in the expressions, the lines and so on. The first job is to get it smooth, and you use any number of tools. Jane likes to use a loop tool, which is what she's using there. I like to use stainless steel kidneys because I like the fact you hold a kidney like this, and if you flip it over, you can see that that's great for curved surfaces. You see I'm almost getting perfect contact. And what I'm doing there is I'm actually flexing it as I feel that it's rolling over the surface.
Right.
And then when I've got big broad areas, I'll actually flip over to the other side. You can actually get kidneys with differing depths of teeth in them. And those are great if you've got some really rough areas, because they will actually
even out.
even it out. And you go in 3 different directions. And a finer tooth will do it even more subtly. And then you have different thicknesses. That's a much stiffer one. And then I love using dog brushes, as you can see there. And the dog brush is fantastic because this takes away the crumbs and very quickly delivers you a smooth, wonderful flat surface.
Sculpting tools is one of these schools of tools where anything goes.
Absolutely.
Right?
And remember the other day we were talking about these wonderful tools.
Oh yeah, I'm totally going home and building a couple of
These are great. And you can see if I start to put in skin pore detail, I can actually start to gesture in the hair detail, the skin detail and the hair pores. And once you work this, you use freezing spray and heat.
Really?
And we try to stay away from chemicals on the surface for as long as possible because it starts to make the surface very muddy. But if you use this combination of tools, you can slowly build up the sense of skin textures.
The ultimate goal is to turn this first phase into this level of skin pore detail.
Oh my God. It looks like a microscope photograph.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And this is more or less the same scale. So you see, once everything's enlarged, it's almost like looking at it through a macro photography camera lens, except you're just using your human eyes at the exhibition on site.
This isn't your first 8-scale figure, is that correct?
No, we've done many. Well, we've done others before. We've done a large number at 2.4 scale. That's this scale here. And you can see the quality of sculpting. And Jane's actually got an arm over here that she sculpted.
Oh.
And just pass that over. You can,
oh my goodness. Oh, it's so beautiful. Wow.
look at the beautiful vein work in it.
Incredible. That is so cool. And this is 2.4 scale.
Yeah, and then we'll go in and even make the fidelity of the pore structure greater. When you see the fiberglass piece that Johnny just held up, many would think, viewing this, that we've over pushed the texture. The reality is that because you're casting into a translucent material, if you don't over sculpt it, it will wash out and look entirely flat. So we actually have to sculpt about a third deeper than the human face actually shows, which is really challenging, trying to get that right. And that's how that piece of fiberglass has come to be, because that's actually a test casting. When we think we've got it, we'll then take a patch cast of a small piece and then hold it up. You then stand back 8 times the distance, right? And you stand the model 8 times the distance away from the patch test, and you look at them both with the same eye, and you can see whether you're getting it to work well. You've got to have the same lighting conditions, of course.
I love the fact that, you know, in film, we always have to make things slightly more for camera, right?
Correct.
You sculpt them to camera, not for reality.
Correct, yeah.
And here you are making something for reality, and you still have to adjust the sculpt because of the size and the scale and the material.
And we've learned that over years and years of making some terrible mistakes where we haven't pushed enough because it looks so good in the sculpture and it just washes out in the final exhibition.
Oh, that's got to be terrible.
Very, very frustrating.
Not only the skin, but we'll be knitting a huge beanie to look like a regular size beanie for the head, and you'll see some of my sleeve and a hooded sweatshirt that I'll be wearing. And then, you know, I'm going to be holding tools, and there'll be tools on my desks. So we've had to, you know, make these tools that you can feel like a borrower. So you can...
Oh, no way.
You can see this here.
Oh, my God.
So A few of our tools at Wētā in the sculpting department are store-bought, but most of them we have to custom make ourselves. So we use a basic guitar string clamped into a copper tube, and they make the best rake. And the finer string, and you know how the guitar strings get smaller and smaller. The finer the guitar string, the finer the rake. And so a basic guitar string would be good for the beginning rake, and you go down kind of a line of them. And so our props department have rendered this fake guitar string out of different various wires to look exactly like this.
I can feel this. This is actually made of wood.
Yeah, we turned it on a lathe. We've 3D printed these two ends. But once painted, you would never know. And if people don't actually touch it and feel the coldness of the metal, so it's really a replica of one of these.
That's
incredible. We've even got the graphics.
It sells 100%, even though I'm holding it right here.
That's nice.
This is so satisfying.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. And I really want to get in here. And
well, that would be right? An 8x sculpting tool for an 8x,
yeah. Oh, that's what you would be sculpting it in, absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be like one of the small collections.
Here you go, Jane. There's your tool of choice for the day. Yeah.
So how long is that process of layering in the skin texture, getting ready for that first patch cast going to take?
It'll take about 8 weeks, 3 people. It's huge. There's no way to speed it up that we've ever found.
Half of a person year.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if you don't get it right, there are things that you make that everyone knows. If you haven't got it exactly right, it's completely wrong. And faces, skin texture, human anatomy. Yeah. Even a 7-year-old child can identify immediately if you've got something off.
There's no middle ground. It's either right or it's garbage.
Absolutely. It's working or completely not working. And and that's why we go to so much effort with the eyeballs as well, of course. And eventually we'll put the eyeballs in, and then Jane and Gong and Dan and C will all work them with plasticine and begin to build up the eyelids and the expressions and so on. And eventually we'll get Johnny into this piece.
Can I help?
Oh, you can, why don't you do some raking?
Yeah.
I'll give you that's a particularly lovely kidney. Oh yeah, why don't you try the loop?
All right.
Jane's a big fan of the loop. So try and smooth out this nose for us. Just the smoothing process will take a number of days, but if we don't get it perfectly smooth.
Once it's all smoothed out, you can start looking at building up the forms, and some of them we will need to push further than what you see here just to make it read at this scale. Mm-hmm. And then the next step will be finding the direction that the skin texture will follow. So before we even start putting pores in, we'll start mapping out the direction that the skin flows around the expression, the way that it's compressed where he's pushed on his face here. And then we'll start going in and sculpting individual pores, adding small flaws like moles and wrinkles and all the great stuff that goes into skin when you start looking at it close up.
Now, I know that most of you have sculpted so many different faces, and I would imagine that on faces there are, when you're trying to get a likeness correct, there are details that matter more than other details to kind of sell a certain face. When it's milled, are there still some of the same problems extant in that? Are there still ways in which you could sculpt a milled out face like that and get it wrong?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. If you think about when you sculpt a bust of a person, before you put in a single detail, if you don't have the form of the head correct, the structure of the head, you will never get a likeness. And it's the same with this. You can see this is, even though this is incredibly soft and crude, you can see Johnny's form is very accurate here because we were very careful to get the scan data to transfer into the milling data very accurately. And now we have the foundation of Johnny in this really, really well.
I'm curious if there are details about Johnny's face that you've highlighted that will help also sell that it's Johnny. I mean, aside from the beard.
I think a lot of it is in the colouring for an actual likeness. Yeah. So we sort of have to look beyond that for quite a long period of time because as sculptors, you don't see it with skin colour or beard or hair or
Right,
eyelashes.
you're always working in monochrome.
Yeah, which is quite a strange sort of mindset to be
You
in.
see these are our meat patches, as we call them. And these are what we use to try, lovely,
This
aren't
is
they?
Leatherface's
Oh,
color.
no. Oh, it's straight out of Naked Lunch.
It is!
eh?
Oh my God, right,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So these we use to check our colour and make sure that we've got the sense of accuracy in that.
We'll probably end up overemphasizing a lot of his features and the skin texture as well, like Richard was saying, so that it will work at the larger scale.
Right.
It took a bit of figuring out on previous jobs how deep pores actually need to be, that once they're not in this grey material and they're in a semi sort of translucent resin, how much detail you lose just because of the light, the way it bounces around. This is very opaque and obviously grey, and people aren't grey, so it's quite strange to see a skin texture in this colour.
Something we've developed over the years is, and many people do this around the world, it's not originally ours, but we sculpt through different types of plastic bag. One of the nicest plastic bags is the cheapest, the bags that you used to get your shopping in.
The blown polystyrene.
Yeah, because it crinkles, because inside a pore is not smooth. A pore has an almost star-shaped crinkled interior. And the beauty of plastic is that it simulates the qualities of the human skin when you sculpt through it very, very well. And there's a network of pores all interlinked and by the wrinkles in the skin.
Oh my God.
So you can start to get a sort of idea of how it will be mapped up. We might want to go in after this and make that pore slightly deeper, link them up again with the direction. And so these direction lines will be traced over his whole forehead to show the way that the skin flows over that area of the face.
So there's no efficiency. Every pore is basically hand sculpted.
Oh, we're very efficient about it.
I don't mean to say no efficiency, but just
yes,
that
they are,
someone has
individually.
concentrated on every single pore on this finish.
And there's no wallpapering of the face. You
Right,
can't use a stamp because the pores on the face change dramatically from here to here, from here to here, depending on the movement, on hair growth, etc. So it's quite an undertaking.
I guess I'm not being a sculptor. I had always known that anatomy was important to the study of sculpting, but the way you guys are talking about it, I had just been thinking about skeletal and musculature anatomy, but you guys are getting into all the parts of the eye and the skin and the hair and the follicles, and I mean, it's everything.
It's almost going to a fractal level of immersion. You're diving down and down and down, and even studying the inside of a pore.
Yeah.
The anatomy of the pore.
The anatomy of an individual pore. And we will have really comprehensive discussions about why a pore at the corner of the nose needs to be different to a pore on the forehead.
Well, this is where the best oil comes from.
Exactly.
Right.
And therefore, the pores here are very different. And interestingly, some of the most unique pores are on the tip of the nose.
Really?
And maybe because a lot of people have acne as children, as teenagers, and that's damaged the tip of the nose. So you get real character in the deformities of the tip of the nose. And if we're doing a one-to-one scale sculpture, we can cheat by doing things like drying out mandarin skin and then taking a little, remember yesterday I was showing you those silicon texture stamps that C was using. Well, we'll dry out a piece of avocado skin or mandarin skin specifically, take a little silicon pull off it, and then that's perfect for putting those random deformations in the tip of the nose caused by blackheads and acne.
Wow. Do you ever find yourself at dinner with someone and you're just staring at their nose and
well, this is
you asked to take a picture?
This is actually a problem. Yeah, it is actually it's a career problem, and all the sculptors talk about it.
Really?
In that you get caught. So, like looking at someone overly studiously, and if they have an imperfection, you can't help but study it and put it in your Rolodex of a brain.
Or if they are extremely perfect as well, it's even more fascinating.
Utterly fascinating. Yeah, and the more beautiful the person is, male or female, the more difficult it is to capture them.
Really?
Because they're beautiful due to their conformity of features. They're almost perfection of features. So there's nothing to pick on. As opposed to Johnny, who's super easy.
Johnny is going to be the most difficult one yet.
Because we know him.
Oh,
Yeah.
we love him.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to make a mess of it. Ultimately, too, tools eventually have to make way to fingers and fingernails. And, you know, one of the best tools that you can possibly have are these two thumbnails. And you can we'll often grow them slightly longer because the thumbnail you've got immense control over as you can use them as a sculpting tool.
I'm noticing something that's happened a few times I have sculpted is that my wedding ring is making dents. And
You got to take
it. Just pull it off.
Your little fingernail is a pain because as you're doing it, you nick the sculpture. So frustrating, especially when you're trying to get a perfect finish.
You really notice too if you have a small cut or an imperfection on your own finger, you'll find that you're making little scrape marks in clay. So it does really, these are your tools as well as these.
I was telling somebody the other night that while fingers on a blackboard doesn't bother me, touching a microfiber cloth does because my hands catch every tiny thread.
Because you've got workers' hands.
Yes.
Yeah. There's such inspiration from other artists around the world as well. Obviously, Ron Muick is the most famous for his work. Jamie Salmon is a huge inspiration to us here in the workshop. We had the great fortune of having Ron and Jamie visit. And Jamie actually worked with us.
Do Ron's skills come from the film industry?
Well, I guess he was already I guess his skills were born into him because he's such a gifted person. But he, of course, spent his early and informative years working in the film industry as a puppet builder.
I guess there was commonality in some of the base of those skills.
Of course, absolutely, there's commonality.
He's preternaturally brilliant at it.
Yeah. If we're trying to get plasticine really, really smooth, you and I have been having a few conversations about the love of sanding.
Yes.
Well, we will actually use sandpaper.
Really?
That 1000 grit sandpaper, because we can then buff the surface to an immensely fine polish.
Wow.
And then the back side of the sandpaper for the final.
To the final
buff.
buff.
Really?
Yeah.
Double use.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so you can see here, we use this stuff. With the foam backing. This is so that it will ride beautifully.
Oh, nice.
And you can see, and then forgive me, but what I will actually do is spit on it. Now, why wouldn't I just use water? Because spittle has a greater level of lubricant because it's got a viscosity to it. And it holds onto the sandpaper better than water. So, you don't want anyone else to come and work over your part of the sculpture and you have to isopropyl alcohol it before they do. But spittle is fantastic when you're doing a wet and dry in the final 1000 grit onto a piece of acrylic or something like that.
It's one of my favorite paint textures is an ultra flat black spray paint that I've just handled with my hands and finger oils until because it's a texture that's impossible to paint.
Absolutely.
Right? It just has a depth to it.
Now, if you watch here, Adam, I'm just going to reinforce what Jane kindly pointed out. So I'm still, as you are doing, I am going in X, Y, and Z, if you like, or north to south, east to west, and across. But then I flip over the product and you watch how instantly that turns into a beautiful, almost mirror surface.
Wow.
And I could now buff that to an absolutely perfect surface. And this is how car modelers, when they're working traditionally, can get it to, and now I'd be able to actually put a 2D primer on this and then lacquer it with car lacquers. And get it to the finish of a car.
That's amazing.
Yeah, beautiful, eh?
Yeah.
The reason we like to take it to a really smooth finish rather than going straight in with the textures is that it means you can't hide anything in the forms. The way that the light will now flow over that brow that Richard's working on, you're going to see every little indent. You'll know everything you've done right and everything you've done wrong.
Right.
And so we'll stand back and look at it smooth before we rush in and start
I just grab
adding
that.
all the wonderful texture.
And I'll just show you what you've got to do is, of course, move the light. So we do this as well, where we chase the light all the way across our surfaces and study them, especially being careful to do this as well. So we can study the deformations in it. Yeah, you think you've got it right. The moment you throw a shadow on it, it's like, oh, another week. Thanks, mate.
So what I'm doing here is I've been adding on rather than taking away pores. I'm adding little balls of clay, and then I'll go over with a tool like this and start blending them together. And this is just laying down an initial sort of textural layer that when viewed from far away will start to read like pores, and you see that I've kept the direction with the little balls of clay. Once this is smoothed out, or at least blended together slightly more, then between them we'll go in and add some pores. And then between those, we will blend them together with small lines to indicate the direction of the skin. You'll then go in deeper and say, we have a forehead wrinkle coming along here. And rather than going in a straight line, we'll chase over where the pores will be to give it a more natural finish.
And that's what wrinkles do. They wrap them out.
Well, there's age wrinkles, there's compression wrinkles, then there's a combination of the two. Like, you know, the wrinkle in the back of my hand there is due to compression and expansion. Right. And because of my age, they remain there now. But some wrinkles are like waves rolling up on a beach. They have a long leading edge and a steep front edge. And then other wrinkles are more like a ripple, as if you flicked a sheet and you get a ripple in it where it starts big and tapers off. And they're all critical, because if you don't get them right in the right places, you know, these ones are really critical because they're compression, but they're also age, they're caused due to length of age. Things that happen around the corners of the mouth are really critical because of the mobility of our mouth. So I'll show you this. One of the people, sadly, that's not here, Dan, at the moment, he's out for the morning, but Dan's the head of our sculpting department, and he's developed a lot of the techniques for these faces. But he works between this scale and this scale. And if you bring the camera right up, these actually have expressions. They have teeth, eyeballs.
What?
And he's sculpting at that scale and then jumping to this scale just as comfortably and as easily. You hold those.
Is he this big?
Yeah. The motor control that you need in your hands to sculpt something like that. And once again, like Jane was doing yesterday, sculpting with a single human hair size sculpting tool, and then to jump up to this scale but carry the same technology, the same artistry is really quite staggering.
That's insane. I can literally see a scar on his face.
Yeah, that's right. There's stitches on their faces.
Wow. Dude. Now I'm worried that I'm just adding texture and moving texture around, but...
That sounds great.
Okay.
That's what we do.
There's
we
only
move
so
it
much
around,
damage I can
take
do
it
in...
away, we put it back.
All right.
I bet you'd love to, rather than flying home tomorrow, just stay here for the next 6 weeks and hang with us doing this.
No, that sounds dreamy.
Yeah, I regret having to leave the room and go back to my normal job and can't just stay here with Jane and the team and do this stuff for a while.
You know, around here, people keep talking about you walking into a room and grabbing something and manipulating it and moving it into the way. And I realize this is, you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it serially every 10 minutes as you go through the day.
Absolutely. It doesn't need much of a nudge, but my job creatively in the workshop might be multifaceted, but one of the primary ones is just to tap the sculptural journey, the creative journey, along its path. So what I do when I come into the room is view the work, hopefully don't do anything because it's so freaking amazing. But if I feel it needs a little tap, I'll go in, and you've got to have the confidence that you're not going to wreck it. And, you know, so Jane will often encounter me coming and doing various sculptural suggestions to her work, which she you know, accommodates wonderfully.
You know, there's a way in which you guys talk about these pieces that I really appreciate, and that you're not trying to force the piece to be a specific thing. You start with a plan, but then I really see that you creatively like want the piece to be its thing.
Well, and you let everyone invest their energy into the piece being the thing it will become.
That's incredible.
Yeah, don't define the piece at the beginning because it will be lesser for it. And she let
it breathe, don't you?
Yep. Yep, you do. You're trying to invest life into an inanimate object.
That's the magic of these things, is that something comes out of it that's greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, that's a great analogy for Wētā as well.
Perhaps that's a really nice thing about this exhibition, that we're not tied in so much to someone else's set vision. It's able to sort of grow and change as it goes along. Yeah.
You can see you quickly start to get results. And after a day of doing this, we'd have the whole face almost completely smooth enough to start blocking in the shapes.
It's also, I mean, it's very meditative, but I also imagine...
Incredibly meditative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is one of those things I forgot about this kind of work, is the camaraderie of sitting, doing something both tedious and wondrous with a group of people doing the same thing.
One of the things I'm very thankful about here is that our teams, whatever department they're in, don't feel a need to own the things themselves. They're willing to work as a collaborative group, and they don't need to know that that piece of work had their name on it, their brand, to the point that in this room, people will actually take their own sculpture and hand it off to someone else in the room if they think that that person might have some fresh ideas. So it becomes the collective effort of a group rather than an individual. Now, some would argue that you lose the core inspiration and individuality. We don't see that. We actually see that it strengthens it by sharing it with more people.
Now, there are many, many, many solutions from Mythbusters that I know that neither Jamie nor I could tell you who came up with the idea. It just
it doesn't
grew
matter.
It grew out of the group and the pairing and the team.
Yeah.
Well, Jane, Johnny, Richard, everybody, thank you so much for letting me. Hey, I actually made some progress.
That's beautiful.
I can kind of see that there's something.
Good to know.
Thank you so much for letting me play.
Cool. It's great, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now, what will be much different when you next see it?
I can't wait.
Now you'll see me in your sleep.